This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, with your hosts, Brandon Spinner and Michael Burns.
And welcome into Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I am Brandon Spinner, one of your hosts, alongside one of my best buddies, Michael Burns. Mikey, happy birthday, buddy.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, so 1991, so that makes you how old?
Old enough.
To
party.
I was going to call you 23, but it's actually the reverse, right? 32?
That is right. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I didn't realize it earlier, but then I was like, oh, yeah, he looks like he's 23, so he just twists around and he's 32.
I get that. I got that baby face, but hey, when I'm older, I'll look young still.
Are you gonna,
young Michael Jackson.
Exactly.
Like.
When you're in your 40s, young like Michael Jackson. But is that your middle name, Michael Jackson Burns?
No, actually, I live in the South, in Alabama, and wasn't born in the South, but my middle name of Dale there fits in real good with Dale Earnhardt Jr. Praise Dale.
Michael Dale.
That's right. It sounds like a race car driver, doesn't it?
Michael Dale, yeah, it certainly does. Or some sort of, I don't know, like famous person. But you're just Michael, and I'm just Brandon.
Thanks.
But we are a bourbon and baseball podcast, so we are going to be talking about all of that. We've got some cool stuff baseball-wise today to break down, but also a nice bottle of bourbon that we'll dive into here in a second. Before we get any further, we want to ask you, if you're watching here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button right there at the bottom, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search Barrels and Barrels Pod, and you can also find us with that same handle on Instagram. We just hit 700 followers. We love each and every one of you. You guys are great to react with and just like chat with. We got a bunch of comments and messages here in the last couple of weeks, Mike.
Yeah. Feedback or just love or just all the above?
Feedback, love, and just like interaction, and it's been cool. This bourbon community is awesome. That's predominantly who's out there on Instagram who follows us right now. But if you're a bourbon or a baseball fan and you want to follow us, head on over.
It's not even baseball season. We barely have baseball to talk about, so wait till baseball gets rolling around. It's going to be fun.
Let's go. We did have a pretty good couple of off-season weeks earlier in the off-season with all the free agency, but also you're going to be able to review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, so if you could please do that, just find our page, scroll down, and find the 5 stars, and we will hopefully give you a shout-out if you do put your name on it and give us a review. So big thank you to the 3 of you who already have given us those reviews. We do have 11 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts, so yeah. What? But we are Bourbon and a Baseball podcast. We're starting with bourbon first this week. Mikey, I am a sucker for bottle and bonds, and I saw this earlier in the year. We're going to go with the Ben Holladay Bottled and Bond Missouri Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Have you seen much about this at all?
When you sent me the picture, hey, I picked this one up. I was like, cool, man. I mean, I guess I get it. It's a bib, so I guess I know why you picked it up. And then all of a sudden, I saw a couple other people cracking them and popping them. So I feel like it's something that's must be good that is getting around all of a sudden.
Yeah, so this is their third release. They did one in the spring of last year, the fall, and then another one from the fall. I think they did May, July, and September for the releases. This is their third bottle and bond. This is a company out of Missouri, as it's deemed a Missouri straight bourbon whiskey, which was actually gone into law in 2019. And it's distilled out of Holladay Distillery in Weston, Missouri. So that is towards the Missouri River. There's some limestone springs on the property. So that's similar to the Kentucky and Tennessee areas where you get the limestone water, which is what they say is the best for making whiskey. So
yeah,
I think the bottle looks similar to Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond in a way. It's got a wagon instead of the house, but it's got that same antique kind of look to it with the blues. There's a red Ben Holladay right across the top, but to me, I get like Heaven Hill Bottle and Bond vibes out of it.
Yeah, I think the bottle and bond real big at the bottom, and then the name. That's what stands out is the name and the bottle and bond separate like that. Yeah, I can see that.
So this is 6 years, which is very interesting when it comes to a bottle and bond. It doesn't have to be 6 years. It has to be 4 years, right? And a lot of them just put them out after 4 years. What's different is this is their like first product, and it's coming out at 6 years. You would think that a distillery that's just putting their stuff out would like to get it out as quick as possible to not only make the money, but to get it out as quick as possible, because then they're making money a little earlier rather than just waiting the next 2 years. But I guess back in the day, because there's a long history to this Holladay Distillery that I'll dive into here in a second. But back in the day, I guess they said 6 years was about the best time for that area of the country for aging. So that's pretty neat. So when it comes in, it checks in at 6 years, as I mentioned. This is the spring of 2016 distillate, which was bottled on September 14th of 2022. So that is going to be about 6.5 years, technically, in new charred oak barrels, as always. So there are 7 floors on their warehouses. They've got 2 of them that they pull from, but this all came from Warehouse C. 72% of it from the first floor and 28% of it from the 5th floor. And I was doing some reading about this earlier, and the master distiller was saying that they do that with this batch to see how much variability there could be from the first floor, which is kind of cool. So they're pulling from different floors for all of their bibs so far.
Well, that's what Maker's Mark did with their 2022 fall release, the 2 different floors. And we reviewed the high floor, right? BRT2 is the high floor.
Bottom floor. Bottom floor is BRT2.
BRT1 was the higher. And I'll tell you, I've only had one sip of the BRT1, and I think there's a difference.
Big difference, or?
Yeah, I think I enjoy one more than I do the other.
Oh, really? Oh, you one more than you do the other. I thought you were saying 1/2. I guess that's a tease for a later pod down the road. Right. As far as this Ben Holladay Bottled and Bond, it's 6 years, as I mentioned. Mash bill comes in at 75% corn, 15% rye, and 12% malted barley. It's 100 proof, as always, as it comes to a bottled in bond bourbon or whiskey. And it's got the seal right there on the top. Again, red, white, and blue, just a navy blue, kind of almost a blackish.
A little American-ish.
It's got a little bit of American hit to it. It's DSP MO5. But I believe it was the first distillery in Missouri. So that's pretty cool. Have you been able to pour it and nose it yet?
I haven't. I was reading about the mash bill. You said it was... Can you read that mash bill one more time?
It's 75, 15, and 12.
Okay. Yeah, so what I'm reading is that's the same mash bill that was developed in 1856 by Ben Holladay himself.
Yes. So they went with the same mash bill when they started to distill again. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of history to this entire distillery itself. It was founded by Mr. Ben Holladay, who was actually kind of not just a whiskey guy. He was like a jack of all trades. Said when he started it, he also, and that's part of the bottle, I don't know if you see the stagecoach or the like Oregon Trail type of wagon.
Yeah. Did you ever play Oregon Trail?
All the time. Loved it. But they called him the Stagecoach King. He created Overland Express Stagecoach, and they were ultimately who sold to Wells Fargo. So the Wells Fargo wagon comes from Ben Holladay.
Interesting.
Little known fact. But
everybody knows Wells Fargo.
Yeah, he owned part of the... What's that?
Everybody knows Wells Fargo.
Yeah, and he owned part of the Pony Express for the brief history that there was at. So he's also got a ton of other stuff, but it's funny that he's going to go down. His legacy is more likely going to be going down whiskey-wise. So he did pass it down through the family, and then another distillery took over. Blue Springs Distillery is what they had named it during their first batch. And it, get this, their first batch they distilled in 1856. Their first juice that they sold was aged for 1 year, and it went for 35 cents per gallon.
Per gallon. Per gallon.
Yeah. So I guess this is on the same land that Lewis and Clark explored back in the early 1800s, and that's how they knew that the limestone springs were in this area. which is very cool. As I mentioned, they started this distillery in about 1849 when they bought the land. They didn't distill until 1856, and then they sold their first batch in 1857, of course. Now, it went right through the family, and then it was bought by a couple of different people. It was sold to George Shawhan back in the early 1900s. His distillery had burned down. Then, of course, Prohibition. And then McCormick Distilling bought it after they purchased it from him back in 1942. And they've kind of really been who was at the forefront of all this. There were some fires. There was all of this. And then they stopped putting bourbon out in 1985. They were like, yep, no more. And they went more towards the non-aged spirits and just different stuff like that. And then in 2015, they got a $10 million renovation, and they started distilling again. So 2015 was the relaunch of all of this, and now we're really starting to see the juice.
Yep.
Yeah, the bourbon craze. So after 30 years, they came back with their juice, and into 2019, they were part of the whole Missouri Bourbon, Straight Bourbon Act there. So that was House Bill 266.
2019 that Missouri Act came in play?
Yeah, 2019. So beginning on January 1st, it was corn exclusively grown in the state.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
Rather than having it, MGP'd for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. So it is a twist top. You poured yours. Have you gave it a nose at all? What are your thoughts on the nose right away?
Sweet. It immediately comes to mind of, and this is a bib, 100 proof. I was just about to ask the proof on it. It smells like a 94 proofer, It's immediately sweeter. I don't get any kind of high rye, which it's not. It is. I think it's lower rye. It's like you said, 15.
Mm-hmm.
It smells good. I get cherry, It's a dark fruit. To me, when I smell a dark fruit, it's a sign of a good bourbon. To me, if I get that dark fruit smell of a good typical bourbon. How about you, Brandon? You getting anything on that nose?
I'm opening my Picks app because I did put a review out of this last night. Right off the nose, the first thing I wrote down here in my tasting book was starts out sweet and simple. It's got that corny, like oak hint to it right up front to me. And in my Picks app, which is pretty cool. We've been doing this the last couple of weeks. They're not a sponsor, but I do think that if you're a bourbon fan or a whiskey fan, any kind of spirit, actually, they've got a bunch of it. You can fill out your score with your tasting notes, what you thought, and then it'll match you with cool different pairings that you might like. It'll send you like notifications. Hey, you matched with this bourbon. You matched with this bourbon. You matched with this whiskey. So that's where I have my notes. My notes are butterscotch, caramel, cinnamon, cloves, and coconut on the aroma. I got the coconut the longer I sniffed it. It doesn't smell hot by any means. I think that on the nose, it's very simple. It's that classic bourbon. It's got a little bit of a different, it doesn't smell like Kentucky bourbon, for sure. There's a little bit of almost a funk to it. Not necessarily a funk, but that's where I think the coconut
it is Missouri
for me.
It is Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri. But I saw you take a swig. What's your thoughts tasting-wise?
The first sip, I haven't taken that sip. I did the first sip to coat my mouth, and it was spicier than I anticipated on the mouth. That was the first sip, though, to get my palate acclimated. How about you over there? Getting acclimated over there, doing a little chew?
Yeah, I did the chew, and like I said, I had this last night, so I've got some more in-depth notes in on this that I don't want to really ruin your palate or your mindset
thoughts.
Yet. Yeah, I don't want to bury that acorn in your brain, right?
Yeah, it's definitely spicier than it smells.
Yeah.
It's kind of hiding a little bit of the flavor for me. I still get that dark fruit taste. It's the viscosity. I wouldn't say it's caramely in the mouth. I know, and that's what helps with the Picks app is if you don't kind of know what to look for, it has all the different things laid out for you, and that kind of helps if you're trying to decide and something pops out at you. That helps. It's not thick on the mouth. It's hard to say it's buttery. It's more oily. than buttery, or it's not thick in the mouth.
I get a little syrup to it, but it's not. No, it's not.
Light.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think that it's like you said. What hit me here in the book, I have written down, has a very peppery hit, quick on the back half of it. It's like sweet. It's almost similar to what we had a couple of weeks ago, where it said it took a hard right turn halfway through. Right, like you go one direction. It's got that sweetness, and then it gets very more. It has more of a rye pepper to it on the back end than I would have anticipated.
Drying out.
For 15%.
Yeah, it's drying out on the back end there, as I haven't taken a sip and just breathing a little bit. But as you compared the bottle look to Heaven Hill Bib, this is the same type of profile that we got, or at least I got from Heaven Hill Bib. I thought it was a little spicy up front.
And that one was 7 years.
And that one was 7 years.
Which is not the normal 4 either. I think this has more of a sharp feel to it.
Man, it's changing as I'm not taking a sip.
To me, it's a little more on the heat, and there's a lot more sharpness to the burn than I would have anticipated. And it's on the back end. It kind of feels like it creeps towards the back. It's light and oak to me. I got butterscotch, caramel, and then some coconut and leather. Those were my real tastings on the mouthfeel, becoming more of like a black peppery rye towards the end. My mouthfeel, I said crisp. It's not thin. It's not oily. It's in between, and I think it's like a crisp feel.
It almost tastes like nutty towards the end. It's dry at the end.
Yes.
Rather
dry
than
walnut.
Staying, buttery in your mouth. I don't feel it like on the roof of my mouth or the cheeks. It's staying on the tongue as the aftertaste.
Yeah. So on our Barrels and Barrels of Bourbon and Baseball podcast rating scale, which Michael, do you want to break that down for our lovely friends and viewers?
So at the top there, you've got Hall of Fame, the best of the best, cream of the crop. We have not had any Hall of Fame yet. Next level down, we've got All-Star. We've got those guys that stand out from your everyday players. Guys that make the All-Star team every year. They're not quite Hall of Famers, but hey, they're fan favorites. And then next step down, we've got an everyday player. Everyday player is going to be a guy that you not necessarily going to drink daily, but a guy that you are constantly going back to, and that bottle's going to be crushed before you know it. After everyday player, we've got a bench player, something that you like it, but you're not going to go to it too often. It's nice, maybe a different flavor profile than something you typically have. Maybe it's a dessert bourbon. So nothing to knock on that, but it's more of a time and place kind of bourbon. And lastly, after bench player, we've got DFA, or designated for assignment, which we don't want on our bourbon shelves. Something that we would not choose to pick up again if we didn't have to. So, Brandon, where does this one fit on your scale?
This is a lot harsher, and I feel like the taste to me and the sweetness up front fades a lot quicker towards more of a burn, a rye pepper burn on the back end. So, I like it. I don't love it. I want to love it. It's one that I look at and I'm like, yeah, I really want to like this. And the smell, like the first half of it to me is the best. And then once you get it past the front half of your tongue, it starts to go away for me. I'm going with a bench on this one. Not because I don't think it's bad. I'm excited to see what they start to put out here over the next couple of years. This is their third batch that they've produced and put out. So I like what they're doing. The first time I heard about them, like big time, was on Dad's Drinking Bourbons podcast, which was their episode 401. If you want to check that out, they had the master distiller on, and it was really cool to listen to him and talk about everything regarding the distillery, what his thoughts were. And I do think that the juice is good. I think that there probably will be better blending between floors. Again, this was 75% or about 75% from one floor and then 28% from the other floor. I'm excited for this, but I'm going with a bench.
Yeah, I think for the history and what they think they're trying to do there. I think that I'm excited for the distillery, but I don't know that if I found this on a shelf somewhere that I'd pick it up. So I'm looking forward with what they're gonna put out, but I gotta DFA it.
You're going to DFA
It
it.
yeah, I think it's too dry, too nutty on the back end for me. That if I take a sip and try to sit here, I don't enjoy that walnut flavor after it. And then up front has that fruit, but it's too spicy up front for me to enjoy that flavor.
Well, there it is. Another DFA from the Axeman, Michael Burns. That's 2 for you, and I haven't had one yet, but I've had 2 All-Stars. So or 3 All-Stars. So it'll.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but I don't know that I would go back to it.
I probably won't buy it all the time I see it. I was excited to buy this one. It's $59.99 MSRP. I'm excited to see what Ben Holladay puts out. I do think that it's a little spicy on the back end, but if they would be able to even that out to where you could get less of a bite towards the back end, I think that this would be a really good pour. And I wonder what even younger juice might taste like. I know they were putting out 6 years just because that's the way they do it, 6.5 years. I bought it in northeastern Illinois in the Chicago suburbs. Yeah. I think I got it for $63.99. I'm not upset about it. So
no, absolutely.
It'll be up there, but I'm not going to go
bourbon.
to it every day, and that's why it's going to be a bench for me.
There you go.
So, one other thing I wanted to toss in, it is in level 3 char barrels. So,
higher toasted than regular.
Yeah, a little bit higher. So, that's that regarding Ben Holladay's Bottled and Bond Missouri Straight Bourbon Whiskey. 6 years. This was the fall release, September 2022. September 14th of 2022 is when this was bottled, and I think it dropped a little bit later on in the year from there. So now switching over to baseball, Andrew McCutchen has just re-signed with the Pirates. That was really cool to see. So that is where this week's trivia question lies, Michael. So with McCutchen back for another year, he has the potential to reach 2,000 hits, 300 homers, 400 doubles, and 1,000 walks in his career later on this season. There's that potential. There are 2 other active players who have already passed all of those thresholds. Who are they?
You're going to have to give me those stats again, though. Say them one more time.
2,000 hits, 300 home runs, 400 doubles, and 1,000 walks.
I'm going to go, at least one of those is Miguel Cabrera.
Yeah, that is correct. And that was the first time I saw this. I guess Miggy right off the bat. And the second one shocked me in a good way, but like it shocked me. Like I didn't expect to see this name.
So that makes me think that my second guess is wrong because I think it's Nelson Cruz.
Nelson Cruz would be a good guess because he's still active. But it is Joey Votto.
Oh, I mean he's another old veteran, so
right. But like to me, the 300 home runs was my question on Joey, because I know he hasn't had power every year. That would be the question I would have had on him. Nelson Cruz is a good guess. I just don't know if he's got 2,000 hits.
He was a late bloomer a little bit. He was with Texas, and yeah,
the Royals, Texas. He's been all over the place in the last several years. Seattle. He was at Texas twice, I think. Because he was there with Josh Hamilton, and then he went back, and then I think
he was wrong with Josh Hamilton. He was the young and then
center.
And then Marlon. He was there with Marlon Byrd too.
I got an autograph from Josh Hamilton and Nelson Cruz on the same ticket back in like 2009, I think, and he's still playing, and it's 2023. Awesome. So it's Miguel Cabrera and Joey Votto. So this week's episode, we're not really going to talk about day-to-day baseball stuff, but there are a lot of changes this upcoming season regarding the MLB, and I think it's going to be a big change, probably the most drastic change we've ever had in the offseason, non-COVID.
Absolutely.
A non-COVID season. Because, of course, 2020, there were the bigger changes with the DH coming, and then that was the innings, the extra inning games were runners on second base.
It's true.
That all
Yeah.
started in 2020 because of COVID, and then 7 inning doubleheaders that year, which has gone away. There are theoretically 4 rules, but within 3 umbrellas, if you call it. Like, there are 3 rules with a 4th one that fits as a drastic one that
sub-rule.
sticks out, but it's like a sub rule. The first one I think everybody's going to notice this year, it's been talked about for a while, the pitch clock. First thought, first blush of a pitch clock, what are your thoughts? Without knowing what they are, the rules, and all of that, like when you heard there was going to be a pitch clock, instant thought.
So there's three things we're going to talk about. Is the veterans. The veterans are going to hate it. They have played the game their way for the last 15 years. They have their routines. They're going to hate it. But the guys who have been coming up through the system, they don't care. That's how they've been through it. If you go to a minor league game, you see the pitcher who's going to warm up that inning. He's the first one on the field because he gets either 8 pitches or the time in between innings of 2 minutes. So you see that pitcher sprints out there before the other team's even off the field. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal going forward. I think the veterans who are 35 plus years old are going to hate it and struggle with it. But the young guys, they don't care. They come in and they get up there and they pitch.
I'm looking for your opinion. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, when this was rumored a couple of years ago, what were your first, like, we don't need a pitch clock? Or it was like, I think this will be good.
Yeah. At first, don't mess with baseball. Baseball is not a time sport. There's not 15 minutes in a quarter. There's not 15 minutes in an inning. Just let the game play. At all the different players' antics, Nomar Garciaparra, getting in the batter's box and fixing his gloves in between, at bats. That's what made
Nomar. He was one of my favorites.
That's what made baseball, and then, a pitcher coming up and slamming the rosin bag and taking his time. That's gone. There is no more of that. You got no time for that. There's no time for like big pressure moments where you can regroup yourself and kind of step off and wipe your sweat for a minute, stare the batter down. There's no more of that.
There still will be. I just don't think that there will be as much, if that makes sense.
Right. But also, I mean, are you going to be okay with, say, it's a playoff game and he takes, the rules, 18 seconds?
So that's it. 15-second pitch timer when the bases are empty, a 20-second pitch timer when there's a runner on, and then 30-second timer between batters, which has already been in place in the minors. But in the major leagues, it's actually been 30 seconds between batters as well. It just doesn't get enforced. But they will be enforcing this. They tested this in 2022. So there's a pitch clock where if the pitcher violates it, it's an automatic ball. And if the batter violates it, there's an automatic strike. And that violation is the pitcher must start his motion before the 15 seconds or the 20 seconds is up. He doesn't have to pitch the ball within those 20 seconds, but his motion has to start. So think about those long routine bullpen guys who like come in and like have to shimmy as they get it. They've got to speed that up. I saw a video of, I think it was Blake Parker in the drastic, because he did this in 2019 in the minors, but he's in the majors. He's like one of the longest in between pitches.
You're going to see a lot of guys develop a new routine, like Mike Clevenger, the steps back and forth before he pitches, where he takes like 8 steps and then delivers the baseball. Maybe you see a lot more of those where the guys can just kind of wiggle back and forth, and that's their motion. Yeah.
So they've tested this in the minors in 2022. You went to a couple minor league games last year. Did you notice it when you were at the game? Like, did you notice, or did you just feel like you were at a normal ball game?
No, normal ball game. No one ever was called a ball. No one ever called a strike. I think that's going to happen a lot, but I didn't notice anything.
Yeah. So my initial thought was the same thing. I played baseball. You don't need to put a timer on it. But the more I look at it, the younger fans are not there. And the biggest reasoning a lot of people always say is it's so slow. Yep. There's not a whole lot of action. This is going to increase the action, not only because more pitches per minute, right? You theoretically you should have 3 pitches per minute on average, if not more when there's nobody on base. But the pitchers don't have as much recovery time. So maybe the mistakes jump up a little more. So there's a little more action on that regard too, right? Like, because the pitcher isn't as sharp, is not as rested, may feel a little rushed, make a mistake, more likely to have a mistake from a pitcher. So I think that's a secondary result from this. More of it is just because we want action a little quicker.
Right.
But I think the quicker the pitchers work, right? Like, it takes a little more energy, a little more stamina. That's what you go out for a bullpen, not a bullpen, a mound visit, right? To give maybe the starter a little chance to breathe, or the pitcher, not necessarily a scouting report. He's just working his ass out on the mound in a rough inning where you just can't get out. Just give him a breather, right? Maybe not able to do that as often.
Right. Because now that, like you said, there's mound visit limits. There's timeout. I think batters get a timeout, but I don't think pitchers get a timeout from what I read.
So pitchers get 2 disengagement allowed per plate appearance, and that's part of that like sub rule that I said it's one of the 4 rules, but it's technically shoved into the pitch clock rule, and that's a pickoff limit, which is going to make things even crazier. Each pitcher has 2 disengagements allowed, so that's a step off or a pickoff, but that counts whether or not it's a step off or a pickoff. So that's your break. So if you disengage, that's 1. If you disengage again, that's 2. Now, on the 3rd attempt, if it's unsuccessful to pick off the runner, that runner is automatically awarded the next base.
That, so I think, will cause a lot of interesting, because even if you're a pitcher and you're in the stretch and you can't step off anymore, but you need to go back through the signs, you just gotta stare the guy down, and you got a pitch clock.
Right.
So you gotta be quick about deciding your signs, and if you can't read it, you're going to be giving the guy second base, third base, home base, home plate.
Yep. And that is, I think, going to create for more stolen bases as well. Because think about a runner. He knows that you're not coming over on the 3rd time, or if you are, he's got to be pristine and perfect. So you might be able to cheat that extra step to get that stolen base, or at least take the extra base, right? You get a better secondary, most likely. So it'll be interesting to see, not only stolen bases wise, but just to see. I'm assuming the most faults are going to be in the first couple of weeks of the year, of the season, right? Because that's when it's still getting used to it. I don't think many people complain about the mound visits like they used to, right?
Yeah,
like
that's true.
It was an issue at first. For the first couple of weeks of the season, but that has gone through. Every change that they've put in has pretty much just flown away, right? Even replay, that is one thing that has slowed the game down a little bit, is replay.
Replay needs to be, sped. I mean, he's out or safe.
Right, like there's a time limit of like 2 minutes. If you don't have a clear answer, it stays on whatever was on the field.
2 minutes, that's 2 batters right there.
Right. Time. But some of them seem to go on for 5, 6, 7 minutes.
It's ridiculous.
So part of that is if the batter violates and he's not in the box and engaged with the box at 8 seconds left, I believe.
So if he's still engaging, as in he's digging in with both feet,
right.
Adjusting, and that pitch clock's coming, he can't be holding his hand up like, hold on, Blue, hold on. There is not.
He's got to be. He's got to be ready to go in 8 seconds.
With 8 seconds left?
No,
or
at 8 seconds. He's got 8 seconds to get in the box, or it's an automatic strike.
Gotcha.
Because
that would have new batting gloves, ones that just stretch on. Because those guys who draw in the dirt are gonna have to draw extra deep,
Yeah, well, Harper is like tap each corner, tap his shin,
exactly
put the bat on the ground, and then point at the pitcher. At that point, I think you just start your windup, and force Harper to change his way too, right?
Well, good thing Harper's out for the first 5 months.
Yeah, but those other batters who go through those routines, like I had a routine when I got in the box. I'm not gonna lie, it was always tap the top front corner, top left corner. Wag the bat 2 or 3 times and then pull it up.
Sammy Sosa?
No, not the Sammy Sosa one.
Oh, okay. Because he did the tap like that, and then 1, 2, 3.
It may be self-conscious, like subconsciously Sammy with the arms up. crotch look. Boy, brings back the good old days. So those are two. Well, that's one rule of the three, but it's got that like sub rule to it. The other one coming in is a big one as well. It's the banning of shifts or limiting shifts. You can still shift, but there are some rules and regulations regarding that. So all four infielders must be within the outer boundary of the infield, meaning they have to have their feet in the dirt.
Right.
And infielders may not switch sides, so you can't take your third baseman and put him on second and then flip them back, even if you're flip-flopping them. Like they used to put Javi. Remember when LaStella was at second and Javi played short? They would put LaStella at short and put Javi at second if they expected the ball to be hit towards the second base side. You can't do that anymore within innings.
You got two on each side. You got two guys on each side.
You may not be able to switch sides. So, like Rizzo could be technically the second baseman. You know how they used to have to make him change his glove when he would come in?
Yeah.
He can still do that because he's not changing sides. But you can't take your shortstop and put him at second base. I think that's a timing thing. I think that's how they're trying to sneak that in because it takes too much time to switch sides. I don't know. But, yeah, infielders may not switch side. And then... So you're excited about this?
I was going to say, I think this is my favorite rule change of the three. Because especially the lefty batters, that have three guys, basically two right fielders, and they're smoking a ball right to the short right fielder, the rover.
Mm-hmm. So. It's really going to help a lot of those players get some extra hits, and it's going to increase action too, right? That's why you go to the ball game, is to see action. There's going to be more hits. There's more balls in play. There's better scoring opportunities. That's what makes a game exciting, right? Every once in a while, there's an amazing catch, right? Or you have a pitcher's duel. But most people, what did they say back in the 90s? Chicks dig the long ball, that Greg Maddox commercial with Tom Glenn.
Right. Exactly what I was thinking
So it's going to create more pressure too, right? Because it's likely going to lead to more men on base, or like most of these guys are going to get probably 10 to 11, maybe 12 extra hits a year.
So Joey Votto will have 70 hits in his 500 at-bats?
I don't know. I think he's only averaged 200 when he has a full season. But did you say Joey Votto?
Oh, I'm sorry. Not Joey Votto. Joey Gallo.
Joey Gallo. I was like, Joey Votto. Are you pooping on Joey Votto? He's going to be a Hall of Famer, bro.
No, sorry. Joey Gallo. Aaron Judge had more home runs than he did hits all last year?
Yeah, I think he had 51 hits last year or thereabouts.
I bet he is so excited.
So this is going to help, I think, a disproportionate amount of people. I was looking at a couple of players that will probably benefit the most. It looks like Kyle Schwarber is at the top of the list. Corey Seager, even Carlos Santana, who was shifted the most out of any batter, I believe, in the league. He would have a potentially, there was a statistic done that said it probably would be 12 hits gained. And I think that may have been why general manager Ben Cherington for the Pirates jumped out after him. He said that with a change in the shifts, you'd expect positive regression. Other players, Tyrone Taylor from the Brewers. There was a funny one. It's Carson Kelly, and then the other one was Salvador Perez, because they shifted him in the opposite way. They would put three people on the left side of the infield at third, short, and up the middle and take it away. But he was one of the heaviest shifted, right? 76% of the time.
Right-handed. Salvador was? Mm-hmm. The righty. Okay.
So around 9 potential extra hits. So I think what that does is it puts more men on base. More men on base leads to the pitchers in the stretch more, which generally leads to more mistakes down the road, right? With that pressure. So like you said, I think it's my favorite and most exciting one of the three, because I think it leads to more action and more excitement.
Yeah. I think it makes what I've read, a lot of managers were telling their second baseman, shortstops, hey, make sure your lower body, you're really focusing on it for those, jump movements for left and right. So you got more ground to cover. And I think even Carlos Correa came out and said, I'm excited for this rule because I get to show off my athletic ability more.
Athleticism, yeah. We have all these athletes, but they don't have to run as far because they're not covering as much ground, right? Because you're taking away half of the field. Um, so that'll be interesting. Like players like Freddie Freeman, Anthony Rizzo, Yordan Alvarez, or Max Kepler, the statistics there said that they wouldn't gain much because of where their ball placement was on their ground balls, and it just didn't work. But who knows?
It's a mind game. It's a mind game a little
that
bit.
too, for sure. Like you get defeated after a while, one or two of them, and you're like, oh, come on, I can't buy a hit.
You smoke the ball, and the second baseman's standing in short right, and it hits him in the chest. Like it's a base
Right.
hit if if no one else is shifted over there.
Yeah. So I think this is going to lead to far more drastic change regarding action in the field as well. And a side note, I think that stolen bases still could be impacted with this because players may be cheating on they can't shift, but they can shift. And you can still put the shortstop almost behind second base.
Right.
You can still put that second baseman closer to first base in that regard. So the covering of stolen bases still could be wonky, right? Because you still bring the third baseman as far out, and that could lead to some extra base running. So there's going to be some implementation to this that I think that teams will still try to play with, right? Like, can it be your toes are on the dirt and your heels are in the outfield? How close is too close? There is a reaction, right? So a consequence to this. If you don't comply, and if you're not aligned properly, it's either an automatic ball or the team can take the result of the play. So they have a choice.
So is there a chance? So can you come out and say you got, out, and you come out and say, I want to review that they weren't shifted correctly.
Oh, I didn't know. I don't know about
I wonder
that.
if that's
I wonder if it's
reviewable.
Yeah, that'll be another
I bet it's
podcast.
not. I bet it's not. Just because it's based. That's how they would do it. Probably. It sounds right.
I wonder if it won't be reviewable, but they'll have a separate ump in the box or the booth watching for that chimes into the umpire on the manager, the crew chief on the field. If they'll chime in and be like, hey, that's a ball, shift was executed or something like that. So
I can already see the Amazon graphics like on opening day. Here's the guys in the gray areas where they have to be. I can already see it.
I wonder if they'll put markings, be like, you cannot be in between, you can't be on this side of this line. Just a little marking on the back so they know.
Chalk.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Just a little chalk line.
Would you be mad with that ruin the look of the baseball field, though, if there was a white chalk line behind second base?
It wouldn't have to be big. It would just be 6 inches right at the dirt line. It would look a little just like a pinprick.
Like that?
I wouldn't even put that. It'd be the size of your mic, if not smaller. Just like 8. Comparing mic sizes over here, Michael.
Moving
Your
on.
mic bigger than my mic. Moving on. So the third rule, I don't think this one creates as much. This is more of a player safety rule. It does have some on the field implements and consequences, but bigger bases. So bases will now be 18 by 18 inches instead of 15 by 15 inches. So that's an extra 3 inches each direction, and that's towards the field and towards home plate. So 90 feet is measured from home plate to the back of the first base. So that distance hasn't changed. It's just that extra 3 inches has been added. That means there's a 4.5 inch reduction between first and second, as well as second and third. So theoretically, that base path is shorter. This is going to create chaos.
You think so?
I think so. I think this is really going to lead to more stolen base attempts. Think about those bang bang plays. They're not bang bang anymore because he's
with
there.
review and that slow motion camera. I mean, that's right. I mean, I saw the statistic where in 2022 there was only 2,000 something stolen bases, where 10 years ago in 2012 there was 3,000. There's 1,000 less stolen bases now than there was 10 years ago. And I mean, are pitchers faster? Are pitchers, the average fastball is faster. Guys, are
Hmm.
they slower? They can't be slower. Everything's faster now. Athletes are better athletes these days with the more better training and such. So
So
why is
last
there
year,
the reduction in stolen bases?
yeah, it's because of Moneyball, right? Like, let's not make outs on the base paths, but also
True.
there's better catchers, there's better pitchers, they're faster. This 4 inch, think about like 4.5 inches. That's a half second of a slide, maybe a little less than that. But like instead of the bang bang, your hand's already there, so that's going to help a stolen. Maybe that guy who gets thrown out a little more than normal, he's going to be safe now. I
So
think that
Schwarber's going
teams
to
are
lead
going to
the
be.
league in stolen bases next year.
I don't know about that. Last year it was the last year it was the fifth least amount of stolen bases in the 2000s, but really it's the fourth because you got to throw the COVID year out because that was a shortened season.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it only falls behind 2021, 2019, and 2018. So over that time span, right? Like the top 8 are all 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So over the last 8 years, where the shift has been a big issue, where all of that has become a little higher on that, velocities ticked up. And again, I think this pitch clock is going to have pitchers not paying as much attention to the runner as well, right? Because they're more focused.
It have to be. You got to get your pitch, make sure it's right, especially the guy on second base.
Right. So you're going to see a couple more of those. Forgot about him on first base, and he got a quick steal. So the bases, I think there's a slight uptick in stolen bases. I think the pickoff thing with the bigger bases combined creates a bigger stolen base issue. We haven't had many stolen bases last year. Um, the Marlins Birdie led the league at 41 stolen bases. The last time that there was 60 was D. Gordon back in 2017. So like nobody's stealing bases anymore. And I think that this gives those speed guys maybe even an extra little value on that 26-man roster, right? Instead of carrying that reliever. Because, well, that's another rule that went into place last year. You're only allowed 13 relievers. So now you're more likely to carry a speed guy, I think, that just does that in field, right? Because you can, in the late game, you can get a better stolen base opportunity.
Yeah, looking up stats. I mean, guys who were like a 40-40 season, 40 home runs, pulling stolen bases. Power and speed guys were rare, but you always had guys stealing more than 40 bases. You had Juan Pierre, last year, one player had 40 stolen bases.
Mm-hmm.
One.
And the AL lead was Mateo for Baltimore at 35. That led the
Yeah.
AL.
And he only got caught 9 times. So he was successful, but he only tried with 35 plus 9, 44.
So, yeah, attempts have been down.
All right, let me see if I can go back 10 years on this statistic thing here.
I was looking at it earlier. D. Gordon went off for a couple of years just because of his intense speed. Like that was one of his tools that stood out more than
Yep.
anybody. But you also had Tony Womack, I think, led the league back in the day with 60 to 70.
Right. So 10 years ago, 6 guys had 40 stolen bases and a lot like at the Brinks, 39, 39, 37, 37
Right. Well,
10
think of
years
Barry
ago.
Bonds. Barry Bonds was stealing 40 a year back in the 90s. So,
Right. So if
and
I
he
go
was
back to
hitting 40 home runs.
2002, like you said, Luis Castillo, 48. Yeah. 47, Dave Roberts, 45.
Yeah.
A lot of more guys stole bases. Suzuki, Damon,
Mm-hmm.
Cameron, Abreu, Jeter,
I mean, back in
Furcal.
2011, Mike Trout was stealing, was it 49?
Well, he was the leader in 2012 with 48.
2012.
49, 49, 49.
49. Yeah, he was a rookie that year. So 49 stolen bases led
That
the AL.
dude had 49 stolen bases, 30 homers, and he hit for an average of 326. Is that a rookie?
Yep.
Leslie rookie? Well, it was 2011 his rookie year.
I thought 11, but it might be 12.
I think it's
thought it was
11.
11.
Yeah, I
But,
think it's 11. Anyways,
yeah.
what a stud. What a stud.
So those are the rule changes this year that you need to get used to. I think it's going to create much more action on the baseball path. I think it's going to create much more action on the baseball field. I think there's going to be more runs too, and I think that that's what the league wants. I'm excited for it. I don't think that these are as drastic as people intend or think they will be. What are your thoughts, like as a whole? Are you
I think
excited? Is it?
I'm excited because these don't change the game necessarily, like the DH did, like the extra innings rule did. The shift changes it a little bit because hey, if you want to leave third base side open, wide open, it's wide open for you. But there's more. I think this is more traditional, uh, you know, playing field. This is more traditional. I don't think it's going to affect anything. So I hope that the pitch clock or anything like where you get automatic ball or it's an automatic balk, I hope that doesn't decide games. Especially, I hope there's a little bit of leniency in big moments. Hey, I hope umpires aren't like looking at it and once, they have a stopwatch up and it hits 15 seconds or 20 seconds, balk, ball, and they let
I
a
think
run
you
score
have
to
to, though.
decide the
I
game.
think they're going to have to, though, because if they don't execute that rule at that point of the game, they don't have any bearings to do it at the beginning of the game. So they
Right.
need
So
to
I
be
think
consistent from A to B. There's no loose in the late parts of the game because the late part of the game is just as important as the beginning part of the game, theoretically. They're all the same amount of outs, right?
I
One
think
out
by
counts
by
for one out.
by October baseball, everybody will have a feel for this. I would just hate to see a pivotal game decided by pitch clock. But it's part of the
I
game. It's a
agree.
rule.
I don't want to see a game decided by that, but it's part of the games. It's part of the rules, and you have to abide by the rules within the game. Again, I agree with you. I don't want to see a game decided by that, but if there has to be a call that
It's gonna
decides it,
happen.
they have to make the call because then they start to push you. So it's going to be an interesting the first couple of weeks. I'd say the first 4 to 6 weeks for players to get acclimated to this. The younger guys won't quite have as much of an issue because they've played with this the last couple of years in the minors. Another one to probably get look forward to at least, maybe potentially next year because I know they're starting it in AAA this year, is automatic balls and strikes. Automatic balls and strikes, those robo umps.
Now, is it automatic or is it you can challenge? I've seen where you can challenge.
I think you can challenge, but I only think you can get a couple of challenges a game, though.
Well, so when you say robo umps, is it the umpire has an earpiece and is being told?
I believe so.
Or is he making the call, and if he's wrong, the player or pitcher can challenge? We'll see.
We'll see. I thought it was there's an earpiece in the umpire. That's how they've done it in a couple of those independent and minor league games. So it'll be interesting to see how 2023 goes at AAA because I think that's really where the litmus test is for that majors themselves. So that is all I have on the new rules. Mike, you have any thoughts or any other things you want to talk about?
No, I know spring training. Managers are ready to get out and test these new rules in spring training and get acclimated so that they're used to it come April.
Well, I wonder if they'll use those rules in the WBC too, because a lot of those players won't be in spring training; they'll be at the World Baseball Classic. So that's going to change things as well because they won't have as much of a spring training in that spring training setting. It's more so going to be on a national stage, like the Olympics, right? So
yeah, that's a good point. A lot of guys, 4 years ago, missed a lot of spring training, but they're playing at a high level. So I don't hate it, but you hate to see a guy get hurt.
Right. Well, that's not what I'm worried about. It's more about how are they going to adjust to the rules because they won't have as much time in spring to get used to it unless the World Baseball Classic adopts those rules. And I don't know if they did. So that's one thing I'll have to check on as I look ahead towards the World Baseball Classic here in a couple of weeks since spring training is less than a month away, buddy.
Less than a month, baby. Let's go.
We are there. We are almost there. Once again, wish Michael a happy birthday. His birthday was last week at the time of this episode airing. So Michael is the big 24 years old. So give him a big give him a big shout out. That has been another episode of Barrels and Barrels, Bourbon and Baseball podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot regarding what the rules are for this upcoming season. We want to know what your thoughts are. Would love to hear what you think of the rules. Head on over to our Instagram page. We're on Facebook as well. That Instagram and Facebook, as well as YouTube. You can find us Barrels and Barrels Pod on all three of those platforms. Twitter, it's at Barrels and Barrels. YouTube, at Barrels and Barrels Pod. We also have an email, barrelsandbarrels@gmail.com, where you can email us if you want some stickers. We also have t-shirts. Michael's proudly sporting that on YouTube right now. Show it, Mikey. Beautiful. Michael, you're on Instagram as well. Where can we find you to wish you a happy birthday?
That's BNB_Burns. If you can't find us on other channels, just look for that pretty blue logo.
The pretty blue logo, Barrels and Barrels. I am at whiskey_weather on Instagram. We're both on Twitter as well. Just search our names and you should be able to find us. We'll have more whiskey reviews coming up. We've got a couple of interviews coming up as well to discuss and learn more about the whiskey world, the baseball world too. Maybe there's a hint going forward as we get closer to spring training. We're going to be talking about Bourbon 101 here at some point as well. And maybe the World Baseball Classic, which we just kind of hinted at and teased at as well. Michael, any last words for our friends, families, viewers, listeners from this episode?
Nothing from me, Brandon.
Nothing from Michael. Normally there is never anything from Michael. So that's it. That's it. Another episode of Barrels and Barrels. We're going to call it episode 15 is in the books. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day and be safe out there, guys and girls.
Let's go.